All right, so today let's take a deep dive into a place that's both fascinating and a little bit chilling. Alcatraz Island. Um, Picture this, an island shrouded in fog. It's surrounded by icy waters, and it's known for housing some of America's most notorious criminals. And today we're going to go beyond just the names like Al Capone and the Birdman to uncover what life was really like on the Rock.
Yeah, it's a place that really captures the imagination. You know this island,
Yeah.
just a mile and a half from the bustling streets of San Francisco. But it feels like a world apart.
Exactly. And to help us navigate this world, we have historian and author Jolene Bobiak. And what makes her perspective so unique is that Jolene actually lived on Alcatraz as a child.
Oh.
Her father was a prison guard, so she had a front row seat to this fascinating and often unsettling environment.
Having that firsthand account is invaluable.
Yeah.
It's one thing to read about Alcatraz, but to hear about it from someone who experienced it as a child adds a whole new dimension.
Absolutely. So before we get into the prison itself, let's set the stage. Alcatraz has a history that predates its infamous reputation. It was actually discovered by Spanish explorers way back in 1775.
That's right, and they named it Isla de Alcatraces, which translates to Island of the Pelicans. It's a bit ironic considering the island's later association with hardened criminals.
Yeah, a far cry from the image of the Rock that we have today. And speaking of its evolving identity, Alcatraz really reflects different chapters of U.S. history. It served as a military prison during the Civil War and later housed Native Americans who were protesting government policies.
This is where we see how Alcatraz becomes a sort of historical mirror, reflecting the changing social and political landscape of the country. It's not just a prison, it's a reflection of our history.
Then comes 1934, right in the middle of Prohibition. When Alcatraz is transformed into a maximum security federal penitentiary, this is when those notorious inmates started arriving. Figures who had become synonymous with the island's grim reputation.
It was a time when organized crime was rampant, and the government needed a place to send the most hardened criminals, those who couldn't be contained, in ordinary prisons. Alcatraz, with its isolation and reputation for harsh conditions, fit the bill perfectly.
And one of the most infamous names to arrive on Alcatraz was, of course, Al Capone. He arrived in 1934, already a legend in the world of organized crime.
Capone's arrival certainly added to the mystique of Alcatraz, but despite his notoriety, life on the island wasn't easy for him. He was struggling with syphilis and faced constant threats from other inmates. Even the most powerful gangster in America couldn't escape the realities of prison life on Alcatraz.
Wow. And then there's George Machine Gun Kelly, another notorious figure. Kelly, along with his wife and several accomplices, ended up on Alcatraz after a series of high-profile kidnappings.
Kelly's case is a stark reminder of how criminal activity can impact not just the perpetrator, but their entire network. His actions landed not only herself, but his wife and associates behind bars.
And of course, we can't forget Robert Stroud, better known as the Birdman of Alcatraz. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most of his bird research was actually done at Leavenworth Penitentiary, not Alcatraz.
That's right. Stroud had developed a passion for birds while serving time at Leavenworth, and he was actually given quite a bit of leeway to conduct his research there. However, when he was transferred to Alcatraz, those privileges were revoked.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the different approaches to incarceration, even within the same system. Stroud's experience highlights how vastly conditions could differ from one prison to the next.
Absolutely. It's also a reminder that even in the most restrictive environments, human beings can find ways to connect with something beyond their immediate circumstances.
Now let's shift gears and hear from someone who experienced life on Alcatraz firsthand. Jolene Bobiak compares growing up on the island to living on a military base.
It's fascinating to consider that Alcatraz, while housing these hardened criminals, was also a community, a place where families lived and children like Jolene grew up.
She talks about restricted areas, constant awareness of security, and a very clear separation between the families and the prisoners. It must have been a truly unique childhood. Imagine having Alcatraz as your backyard.
It's a juxtaposition that's hard to fathom. On one hand, you have this island fortress designed to isolate and confine some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. On the other, you have families trying to live ordinary lives amidst this extraordinary backdrop.
And in the midst of this unusual setting, there was an incident Jolene describes, where an inmate slipped her a handball through the fence when she was just a young girl.
It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the complexities of life on Alcatraz. Even in a place designed to keep people apart, these unexpected human connections could still emerge.
It's a reminder that even in the most controlled environments, human nature finds a way to express itself. And speaking of dramatic events, one that Jolene experienced firsthand was the infamous June 1962 escape attempt.
Ah, yes. The escape that cemented Alcatraz's place in popular culture and captured the imagination of people around the world.
Jolene remembers being woken up by the sound of sirens and feeling the palpable tension in the air. As everyone searched for the missing prisoners, it must have been a surreal and unsettling experience.
I can only imagine. This wasn't just a news story. It was happening in her own backyard, in the community where she lived. It must have shattered any sense of normalcy they had on Alcatraz.
Now, you can't talk about Alcatraz without talking about escape attempts. The island's location, the treacherous currents, the freezing water, it all seemed to make escape impossible.
Alcatraz was designed to be inescapable, both physically and psychologically. The very name, The Rock, speaks to this sense of impenetrability.
Yet despite the odds, there were those who dared to try. One such attempt involved John Paul Scott, who actually managed to swim to the mainland.
Scott's story is a testament to human determination, to the unwavering desire for freedom, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
Sadly, he was recaptured just hours later, proving that even if you could conquer the physical challenges of escaping Alcatraz, eluding the authorities was a whole other battle.
It's a reminder that freedom is a multifaceted concept, encompassing not just physical liberation, but the ability to live without the constant threat of recapture.
Then there's the Battle of Alcatraz in 1946, a violent uprising that resulted in the deaths of both inmates and guards. This event really exposed the undercurrent of tension and desperation that existed within the prison walls.
The Battle of Alcatraz was a turning point in the prison's history. It highlighted the inherent dangers of a high-security environment and the lengths to which inmates would go to fight for control, or in some cases, simply for survival.
It also raised questions about the effectiveness of the prison security measures and the psychological toll of confinement on both inmates and guards.
Right. The incident forced a reckoning with the reality that even a place designed to be inescapable was still vulnerable to human ingenuity, desperation, and the unpredictable nature of violence.
And perhaps the most infamous escape attempt of all, the one that truly captured the public's imagination, was the meticulously planned June 1962 escape. This event, later immortalized in the Clint Eastwood film Escape from Alcatraz, began with a seemingly insignificant discovery by inmate Alan West.
That's right. West, while working in one of the maintenance corridors, stumbled upon an unsealed vent leading to the roof. This seemingly minor flaw in the prison structure would become the starting point for an audacious plan.
For months, West, along with brothers John and Clarence Anglin, meticulously planned their escape. They dug through concrete walls, crafted dummy heads to fool the guards during nightly bed checks, and even fashioned a makeshift raft and life jackets out of raincoats.
The level of detail and ingenuity involved is simply astounding. They transformed everyday objects into tools of escape, demonstrating a level of resourcefulness that is both impressive and, in a way, terrifying.
Then on the night of June 11, 1962, the Anglin brothers, along with West, put their plan into action. They navigated the prison's labyrinthine corridors, reached the roof, and vanished into the fog-shrouded night.
Their disappearance has fueled speculation and debate for decades. Did they perish in the frigid waters of San Francisco Bay, or did they manage to outsmart the authorities and disappear? The mystery endures, adding to the allure of Alcatraz.
It's a question that continues to captivate, isn't it? The idea that they might have successfully pulled off the impossible, that they might be out there somewhere, living under assumed identities.
It speaks to our fascination with the unknown, with the possibility that some mysteries may never be fully solved. The Anglin brothers' fate remains a tantalizing enigma, adding another layer to the already compelling story of Alcatraz.
And it's that story with all its complexity and intrigue that we're here to unravel today. We'll delve into the lives of those who are confined within its walls, explore the psychological impact of isolation and confinement, and examine the legacy of a place that continues to fascinate and intrigue us long after its closure.
It's a journey that will take us beyond the headlines and into the heart of a place that has become a symbol of both human resilience and the enduring power of mystery.
So stay with us as we continue our deep dive into the world of Alcatraz.
So, picking up where we left off, that 1962 escape, it really gripped the public's imagination. It wasn't just the audacity of the plan, but the fact that they were never found.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, did they make it? Or did the frigid waters of San Francisco Bay claim them?
Well, the official investigation concluded that they likely drowned, but the lack of conclusive evidence has kept the possibility of their survival alive. Some believe they made it to South America. And there have even been alleged sightings over the years.
Oh, wow. It's a mystery that's fueled countless books, documentaries, and even that Clint Eastwood movie. But beyond the allure of the unknown, the 1962 escape had a real impact on Alcatraz.
It certainly highlighted the vulnerabilities of the prison, even one as seemingly impenetrable as Alcatraz.
Right, and it wasn't long after the escape that Alcatraz closed its doors for good. In March of 1963, just 9 months after the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris vanished, the prison shut down.
While the escape played a role, the closure was ultimately a result of several factors, including the prison's deteriorating condition and the high cost of maintenance.
Makes sense. It's a reminder that even a place as iconic as Alcatraz wasn't immune to the practical realities of budget constraints and aging infrastructure.
Yeah, the island was essentially abandoned for almost a decade, left to the elements and the ghosts of its past.
But then something remarkable happened. In 1972, Alcatraz was reborn, not as a prison, but as a national park.
This transformation is symbolic, isn't it? Alcatraz went from representing confinement to becoming a place of historical reflection and even recreation. It's a shift that reflects changing societal attitudes towards punishment and rehabilitation.
Absolutely. And it's thanks in part to the Native American occupation of the island, which began in 1969.
That's right. The occupation, which lasted for 19 months, brought attention to indigenous rights and the historical significance of Alcatraz. To Native American tribes,
It's a reminder that the history of Alcatraz is layered and complex,
yeah,
encompassing not just the era of notorious criminals, but also its significance to indigenous people long before it became a prison.
the occupation played a crucial role in raising awareness and ultimately contributed to the island's transformation into a national park.
Now let's go back to Jolene Babiak's experience for a moment. Her childhood on Alcatraz offers a unique glimpse into what life was like beyond the bars.
Her stories really humanize this place. That's often shrouded in myth and legend.
Right, she talks about the strict separation between families and prisoners. It was like living in two different worlds, coexisting on the same island, but rarely intersecting.
Jolene mentions that their house had a view of the prison yard, and she would sometimes watch the inmates from her window. It must have been a strange and unsettling experience for a child.
I can only imagine. Imagine the conversations at the dinner table. You know it's not your typical childhood experience.
It's no wonder Alcatraz has had such a profound impact on her life and work.
And Jolene recounts that even though there was this strict separation, there were still moments of human connection. Like that time she received the handball through the fence.
It's a poignant reminder that even in a place designed to isolate and punish, those small acts of kindness of reaching across the divide could still occur.
Those moments probably meant a lot,
Yeah.
especially in an environment where human connection was so limited.
It's also interesting to consider the perspective of the inmate. Who gave her the handball? What motivated that gesture? Was it boredom compassion or something else entirely? We can only speculate, but it adds another layer of intrigue to the story.
Right? It makes you wonder about the lives and stories of those who were incarcerated on Alcatraz, the individuals behind the infamous names and mugshots.
And that's what's so fascinating about Alcatraz. It's not just a place, it's a collection of human stories, each one a complex tapestry of choices, consequences, and in some cases, even redemption.
Let's talk a little more about those stories, specifically the lives of some of the infamous inmates. We already touched on Al Capone, but what was his time on Alcatraz really like?
Well, despite his reputation as a ruthless gangster, Capone was apparently a model prisoner on Alcatraz. He followed the rules, worked in the prison laundry, and even joined the inmate band.
That's surprising. It seems like a far cry from the flashy, powerful figure he was in Chicago.
Some believe he was trying to improve his image in hopes of an early release. Others suggest that the harsh realities of Alcatraz simply broke his spirit.
Either way, it's a reminder that even the most notorious criminals are still human beings, capable of change and adaptation.
Exactly. Their lives weren't just headlines and mugshots. They were individuals navigating a harsh and unforgiving system.
Then there's Machine Gun Kelly, who seemed to have a very different experience on Alcatraz. He was known for complaining about the conditions and bragging about his past exploits.
Kelly's behavior is often attributed to his narcissistic personality. He seemed to crave attention and notoriety, even within the confines of Alcatraz.
It's almost like he couldn't let go of his past, of the persona he had created for himself.
Perhaps. Or maybe it was a way of coping with the psychological strain of imprisonment, of clinging to a sense of identity in a place, designed to strip you of your individuality.
It's a reminder that every inmate brought their own baggage to Alcatraz, their own psychological makeup. and their own way of coping with the challenges of confinement.
And those individual stories, those glimpses into the human experience behind the bars, are what make Alcatraz such a captivating subject.
Okay, so we've talked about the notorious inmates, Jolene's unique perspective as a child on the island, and the infamous 1962 escape. But let's delve a little deeper into the prison itself. What were the conditions like for the inmates? What was it like to be confined to Alcatraz?
Alcatraz was designed to be a place of punishment, not rehabilitation. The conditions were harsh, deliberately so. Inmates were kept in solitary confinement for extended periods, and the daily routine was regimented and dehumanizing.
Sounds incredibly bleak. What was the psychological impact of that kind of environment?
Well, the psychological effects of solitary confinement are well documented. It can lead to anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and even suicidal thoughts.
And on top of that, you have the constant awareness that you're on an island surrounded by water with little hope of escape.
Mm.
Must have been a crushing weight on the psyche.
Absolutely. The isolation of Alcatraz was a weapon in itself, a way of breaking the spirit and enforcing compliance.
It's hard to imagine enduring that kind of isolation and deprivation day after day, year after year.
And yet, despite those harsh conditions, there were still moments of defiance, of creativity, and even of humor.
Like the elaborate escape attempts we've discussed, those were acts of defiance, weren't they? A refusal to be broken by the system.
Precisely. And even in the mundane aspects of daily life, inmates found ways to assert their individuality, whether it was through art, music, or simply finding ways to connect with each other, despite the restrictions.
It's a testament to the human spirit, isn't it? Even in the most oppressive environments, that spark of creativity and resilience can still flicker.
It's a reminder that even in a place like Alcatraz, hope could never be entirely extinguished.
And speaking of hope, let's circle back to the 1962 escape for a moment. That event, more than any other, captured the public's imagination and cemented Alcatraz's place in popular culture.
It's a story that continues to fascinate us, isn't it? The idea that these three men might have outsmarted the system and disappeared into the unknown.
It's the ultimate underdog story, a triumph of human ingenuity over seemingly insurmountable odds. But it also raises some interesting questions about the nature of freedom and the lengths to which people will go to achieve it.
Exactly. The 1962 escape forces us to consider the motivations behind their actions. Was it simply a desire to escape confinement, or was there something deeper at play, a yearning for something more than just physical freedom?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll explore further as we continue our deep dive into the world of Alcatraz. Stay with us as we delve into the psychology of escape, the enduring allure of mystery, and the legacy of a place that continues to captivate our imaginations. Picking up on that question about freedom, it makes you think about what it really means to be free. Was it just about escaping the physical confines of Alcatraz, or was there something more they were searching for?
That's a question that goes to the heart of the human experience, the desire for autonomy, for self-determination, for the ability to shape your own destiny. The inmates on Alcatraz, they were stripped of those fundamental rights. And the escape attempts, in a way, were an act of reclaiming some measure of control, even if it meant risking their lives.
Yeah, and it's interesting to consider the psychological effects of that kind of environment, where every aspect of your life is controlled and dictated by others. We've talked about the physical challenges of escaping Alcatraz, but what about the mental and emotional toll it took on the inmates?
Well, the psychological impact of long-term imprisonment, especially in a place like Alcatraz, is significant. Solitary confinement, lack of privacy, the constant threat of violence. All of these factors contribute to a sense of hopelessness and despair.
Jolene Babiak actually touched on this in one of her books. She writes about how her father, the prison guard, would often come home from work, visibly drained and stressed. Even for those who weren't incarcerated, Alcatraz casts a long shadow.
It's a reminder that the impact of a place like Alcatraz extended far beyond the prison walls. It affected the families of the guards, the staff who worked there, and the community as a whole.
It's also interesting to think about how the perception of Alcatraz has evolved over time. During its operational years, it was seen as a symbol of America's tough-on-crime approach, a place where the most hardened criminals were sent to be punished and isolated from society. But today it's viewed more as a historical curiosity, a reminder of a bygone era in criminal justice.
Yeah, that shift in perception, it reflects a broader evolution in our thinking about crime and punishment. There's a growing recognition that the goal of incarceration shouldn't just be punishment, but also rehabilitation, helping inmates reintegrate into society and break the cycle of criminal behavior.
It makes you wonder if a place like Alcatraz could even exist in today's world, with its emphasis on human rights and the need for rehabilitation.
It's a question that sparks debate, isn't it? There are still those who believe in the need for maximum security prisons to house the most dangerous criminals, those who pose a significant threat to society. But the debate is shifting towards finding ways to make prisons more humane, to focus on rehabilitation and reintegration, rather than just punishment and isolation.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But the story of Alcatraz forces us to confront those questions and to grapple with the ethical and societal implications of how we treat those who break the law.
It also invites us to reflect on the nature of freedom itself. What does it mean to be truly free? Is it simply the absence of physical constraints? Or is there something more to it? A sense of purpose, of belonging, of being able to contribute to society in a meaningful way?
Those are questions that resonate far beyond the walls of Alcatraz. There are questions that challenge us to examine our own values, our beliefs about justice, and our responsibility to create a society where everyone has the opportunity to live a life of dignity and purpose, even those who have made mistakes.
And that perhaps is the most enduring legacy of Alcatraz. It's not just a place, it's a symbol, a reminder of the complexities of human nature, the consequences of our choices, and the enduring struggle for freedom in all its forms.
It's a story that continues to fascinate, to provoke, and to challenge us to think deeply about the meaning of justice, freedom, and the human condition. And as we conclude our deep dive into the world of Alcatraz, we invite you to ponder those questions, to explore the many layers of this captivating story, and to draw your own conclusions about the lessons it holds for us today.
Alcatraz may be closed, but its story lives on, a testament to the enduring power of human resilience, the allure of mystery and the complexities of a society, grappling with the challenges of crime and punishment.
We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Alcatraz. Be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating topics, expertly curated to spark your curiosity and leave you with new insights. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.